marrying a plumber. How embarrassing. That was the last thing my mother ever said to me, like I was a public mistake she needed to erase. My sister laughed, asked who would even show up, and they walked away while I stood in my dress, alone, pretending my knees weren't shaking. Then my phone buzzed with one message that cracked my heart open, but within 24 hours, the man they called trash would be on every news channel. And I'd wake up to 129 missed calls. My name is Nia. I am 28 years old, and I design landscapes for a living. That means I spend my days imagining how to turn dead space into something that breathes, something that feels like safety. I build gardens where people can exhale. The cruel part is I have never fully had that in my own family. In my parents' world, the only peace that matters is the kind you can buy, display, and brag about. Desmond and Patrice Vance did not raise daughters. They raised reputations. I learned that early. The way you learn a stove is hot. You only have to touch it once to understand pain has rules. If you did not match their idea of success, you were not punished loudly. You were erased quietly. Kesha, my sister, learned how to perform for them. She learned the laugh, the posture, the name dropping, the way to look expensive, even when she was just borrowing shine. I learned how to disappear. I became the good one, the obedient one, the one who got the grades, kept the house calm, never caused a scene. And for years, I confused their tolerance with love. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I stayed polite enough, if I made myself small enough, they would finally choose me. Then Marcus walked into my life with rough hands and soft eyes, and suddenly I realized I had been begging at a table that never intended to feed me. Marcus King did not look like the kind of man my family worships. He did not wear status like cologne. He wore work boots like armor. He spoke simply. But when he spoke, you felt the truth in your bones. I met him on a job site, not even mine, one I was consulting on for a community redevelopment project. The city had a drainage issue that kept flooding a new greenway we were trying to build. I was standing there with my clipboard, frustrated, while contractors pointed fingers and pretended not to know why the water kept pooling. Marcus walked up like he owned the problem, not like he owned the people. He crouched, touched the soil, traced the slope with his eyes, then asked a few questions that made the foreman blink, like someone had slapped him with common sense. He wasn't loud. He wasn't arrogant. He was precise. 10 minutes later, he explained the issue in plain language and told them exactly what to do. It was the way he said it that got me. No performance, no ego, just competence and care. When he looked at me, he didn't look past me. He didn't scan my outfit for labels or my name for connections. He saw me. I remember that because it made my chest ache. It shouldn't feel rare to be seen, but it did. We started talking, then texting, then laughing, then building a life in small moments. Cheap tacos in the truck after a long day, a quiet walk through Piedmont Park where he asked me why I design spaces the way I do. I told him I like creating places where people feel safe. He said, "Then you know exactly what you deserve." That sentence stayed with me, because nobody in my family ever talked about what I deserved. They only talked about what I should be. When I told my parents about Marcus, I tried to make it sound acceptable. I tried to translate him into their language. I said he owned his own business. I said he was smart. I said he worked on major infrastructure projects. I said he had goals bigger than most men I'd met. My mother didn't ask if he treated me well. She asked, "What does he do, specifically?" Like my happiness needed a job title to justify it. When I said plumbing, her lips tightened, not because she didn't understand the work. She understood exactly what plumbing means. It means dignity. It means necessity. It means a man who can build and fix and solve problems with his hands and brain. But to her, it meant class. It meant not our circle. It meant embarrassment. Still, I believed, in some stupid corner of my heart, that if they met him, If they saw how gentle he was with me, how grounded he was, they would soften. That was my first big mistake. The dinner from hell happened 6 months before the wedding, in my parents' mansion in a gated community where the grass looks fake and the neighbors measure your worth in square footage and silence. I warned Marcus. I told him my family judges everything. I told him to wear a suit, not because he needed one, but because they did. He stared at me for a long second and said, "I'll dress respectful, but I'm not dressing like a liar." He had been at a worksite all day inspecting a water facility project, and he came straight from there. He arrived in heavy-duty coveralls and steel-toe boots, with a name tag stitched on his chest like a target. There was a faint smell of solvent on him, and a smudge of grease on his thumb. When I saw him at my parents' door, my stomach dropped. Not because I was ashamed of him, because I knew they would be. My father, Desmond, opened the door, holding a crystal glass, like it was part of his personality. He looked Marcus up and down, and didn't even try to hide the disgust. Marcus extended his hand, polite, warm, confident. "Mr. Vance, pleasure to meet you." My father stared at the hand like Marcus had offered him something dirty. Then he turned away and walked inside without shaking it. Over his shoulder he said, "Patrice, have the maid sanitize the entryway tomorrow. It smells like manual labor." I felt my face burn. I felt that old familiar shame. The one they trained into me. The one that says, "Your job is to apologize for other people's cruelty." Marcus didn't flinch. He looked at me, gave me the smallest wink, like he was telling me, "I can handle this." We walked into the dining room, and it was like stepping into a courtroom where I was already guilty. Kesha sat there in a designer dress, glowing under the chandelier, like the golden child she'd been crowned as. Next to her was Brad, her fiancé, Wall Street smile, shark eyes, the kind of man who thinks confidence is a substitute for character. My mother's questions were not questions, they were traps. "Do you feel comfortable using the proper silverware? Have you ever been to a tasting menu restaurant? Are you familiar with investment portfolios?" Marcus answered calmly, never defensive, never begging. Every time I tried to redirect toward his work ethic or intelligence, they cut me off like I was interrupting the main show. Then Brad decided to perform. He leaned back, looked at Marcus's boots, and laughed like he'd been waiting all night to do it. "So, Marcus, Nia tells us you deal with pipes for a living." Marcus nodded. "Yes, I specialize in fluid dynamics and infrastructure systems." Brad barked out a laugh. "Fluid dynamics. Fancy words for a plumber. Listen, buddy. Our guest toilet upstairs has been acting up. Since you're already dressed for the sewer, why don't you go fix it? I'll even throw you $50. The table erupted. My mother covered a giggle like she was a teenager. My father nodded like this was brilliant. Kesha smirked openly. My vision tunneled. I stood up so fast my chair scraped. I was ready to scorch the earth. And that's when Marcus put a calm hand on my forearm, not stopping me with force, but with steadiness. He picked up his wine glass, swirled it once, and looked Brad dead in the face. Actually, based on the age of the house and the slope of the property, the issue probably isn't the toilet. It's likely a ventilation deficit in the main stack, creating negative pressure and a vacuum lock in the drainage system. $50 won't fix physics, but I can recommend a consultant who charges $200 an hour to diagnose problems money can't hide. Silence. The kind that makes people swallow hard. Brad's smile collapsed. He looked confused. My family didn't see Marcus's intelligence. They saw audacity. My mother slammed her fork down and hissed, "How dare you speak to Brad like that in my house? You come in here smelling like grease, and you think you can lecture a finance executive." My father pointed to the door. "Get out. We don't tolerate insolence from people of your station. Nia, if you leave with him, don't bother coming back until you find someone worthy." Marcus stood up slowly, pulled my chair out for me like a gentleman, and said, We're leaving. And don't worry, I wouldn't want to stay in a house where the plumbing is broken and the people are worse. We walked out, and in the driveway, I shook with humiliation and rage. Marcus held my face in his hands and said, "You never have to earn love from people who only love power." That was the moment I chose him fully, not as rebellion, as survival. 2 weeks later, my parents summoned me back, not to apologize, but to remind me who they thought I was. It was a brunch for Kesha's engagement announcement. Basically, a coronation. I went alone to protect Marcus, and because, if I'm honest, some part of me still wanted to see if they could be decent for 5 minutes. They couldn't. My mother praised Brad like he was a royal heir. This is the kind of man a Vance woman marries. Marriage is strategy, Nia. Legacy. Power. Then she turned to me with that cold, pitying gaze and said, "And then there's you. I wonder where we went wrong." Kesha lifted her hand, showed off a massive diamond like it was proof she mattered. They gasped and worshipped it. Then they stared at my ring. The vintage platinum piece Marcus gave me. Delicate filigree, a stone that glowed quietly. And they sneered. "It's so small," my mother said. "It looks like a pawn shop ring." Kesha smirked. "Poverty chic." I protected my hand like they could contaminate it with their cruelty. I said, "It fits me. It's what I wanted." My mother sighed like I had disappointed her on purpose. "If you're determined to marry this laborer, don't expect us to celebrate. We're saving our resources for a wedding that matters." That's when I knew, not suspected, knew they weren't coming. And if you've ever been the person in your family who gets treated like an inconvenience, I want you to drop a comment right now and type, "I see it." Because pretending you don't feel it is how they keep getting away with it. That night, sitting in my car outside their house, I didn't cry like a child anymore. I cried like someone burying a version of her life that never existed, and I didn't know it yet. But that burial was the beginning of my freedom. In part 2, I'm taking you to the moment my father gave me the ultimatum that tried to break me, and the quiet decision Marcus made right after that which set up the justice they never saw coming. Also, if you're here for consequences, not forgiveness, hit like and subscribe right now, because what happens next is not gentle, it's deserved. 3 weeks after that brunch, my father summoned me to his study like I was an employee being written up. The Vance house has a way of swallowing sound. Thick carpets, heavy drapes, walls lined with plaques and framed photos of my father shaking hands with people whose names mattered more than mine ever had. I stood outside the oak door for a full minute, steadying my breathing, rehearsing my words the way I had done my entire life. Not to be honest, to be acceptable. When I knocked and heard him say, "Come in," it felt like stepping into a courtroom where the verdict was already decided. Desmond Vance sat behind his massive desk, reading glasses low on his nose, reviewing documents like, "My life was a distraction." I sat across from him, hands folded tight in my lap. "Marcus and I set a date," I said carefully. "Second Saturday of next month." He removed his glasses slowly, placed them on the desk, and looked at me with a disappointment so deep it felt surgical. "So you're actually going through with this," he said quietly. "You're going to stand up in our community and marry a man who cleans pipes." I swallowed. "He doesn't clean pipes. He builds systems, and even if he did, that wouldn't make him less than." My father stood and walked to the window overlooking the estate grounds. "Good men are common, Nia. Successful men are rare. Your mother and I didn't sacrifice everything to drag this family into rooms we weren't allowed in just for you to marry the help." He turned back to me, eyes cold. "If you marry him, you are no longer a daughter of this house." The words landed heavy and final. "I will not pay for this wedding. Not the venue, not the dress, not a single flower, and we will not attend." If you walk down that aisle with him, you do it alone. I felt something snap inside me, not loudly, but completely. I didn't come for your money, I said, my voice steady, even as my hands shook. I came because I wanted my father there, but if your love depends on my husband's resume, then I guess I never really had it. I stood, walked out, and sat in my car staring at the steering wheel until my vision cleared. That was the day I accepted that my parents didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as an investment that didn't perform. When I got home to our small apartment, Marcus was at the kitchen table sketching something in his notebook. He looked up and didn't ask questions. He just stood and held me. "We'll do it ourselves," I whispered into his chest. "Just us." He nodded, like he'd already decided the same thing. That night, we opened a spreadsheet and started planning a wedding fueled by stubborn love and limited funds. It wasn't glamorous, it was honest. I had just poured most of my savings into starting my own landscape architecture studio. It was my dream, but in its infancy, it was a financial sinkhole. Now I was staring at catering quotes that made my chest tighten. Marcus offered to pay. "I've got savings," he said. "Let me handle it." I refused, not because I didn't trust him, because I respected him. "I'm not starting our marriage by draining you," I said. "We're partners." He hesitated like he wanted to say something else, then let it go. I didn't know then that he could have paid for the entire wedding without blinking. I didn't know he was testing something, watching to see if I loved him when I thought he was struggling. We cut the guest list. We chose a public botanical garden. We booked a food truck. It was small. It was ours. 2 weeks later, we attended Kesha's engagement party. It wasn't a party. Regis looked like money had exploded, and someone decided to decorate with the debris. Champagne towers, ice sculptures, a live orchestra. I wore a simple emerald dress. Marcus wore his dark suit. He looked composed, confident, like he belonged anywhere he stood. My family didn't agree. When I checked the seating chart, my stomach dropped. Table 29, the last table, against the kitchen doors. Next to the restrooms, they had seated us with the staff. It wasn't subtle. It was intentional. My mother floated over in gold sequins and smiled like she was doing us a favor. "We thought you'd be more comfortable here," she said, loud enough for people to hear. "Among your own kind." I stood up, ready to leave, my face burning. Marcus squeezed my hand. "No," he whispered. "We stay." He looked at my mother with calm eyes. "Thank you for your consideration." I didn't understand then, but I trusted him. We stayed. We ate. We smiled. And I watched my family reveal themselves to everyone around them without realizing it. A week later, we found Willow Creek Gardens. It was perfect, affordable, owned by an elderly woman who liked our story. I posted one photo. Kesha saw it. So did my mother. 3 days later, the venue canceled. "Scheduling conflict," the manager said quietly. Then he whispered the truth. "Your mother called. She told the owner hosting you would be bad for business." I sat in the dark that night, refund notification glowing on my phone. When Marcus came home and I told him, he didn't rage. He went still. He stepped onto the balcony, made one call, and came back inside like nothing happened. 20 minutes later, the venue called back, apologizing, upgrading us to their most expensive pavilion at no cost. I thought it was luck. It wasn't. It was control. I just didn't know it yet. Dress shopping was supposed to be quiet, healing. I found a lace sheath that made me feel beautiful for the first time in months. Then the bell chimed. My mother and sister walked in. They circled me like sharks, mocked the dress, questioned my ability to pay. My mother whispered to the sales associate. The girl's demeanor changed instantly. "You need to take it off," she said flatly. "We don't do layaway." Humiliation burned through me. Then Marcus walked in. Work clothes, boots, tired eyes. He took one look at my face and walked straight to me. "You look breathtaking," he said. He turned to the associate. "We'll take it," she sneered. "It's $2,000. Marcus handed her a black metal card. The Centurion. The room froze. The payment went through instantly. My mother scoffed. "Debt," she whispered to Kesha. They had no idea. We left with the dress. Invitations went out. Then the declines came back, one by one, excuses so flimsy they insulted me. My mother had given them an ultimatum. My wedding, or Kesha's. They chose power. I sat on the floor, surrounded by rejection. Marcus held me. "Let them stay away," he said. "We'll fill those seats with people who matter." The night before the wedding, I went to my parents' house one last time. I begged. My father dropped my invitation in the trash and said, "To me, you are dead." I walked out numb, but free. The morning of the wedding, my side was half empty. Marcus's side wasn't. Men in bespoke suits. Quiet power. Familiarity with Marcus that confused me. I checked my phone. Yacht party livestream. My family laughing, erasing me. Marcus took my face in his hands. "Stop looking at them," he said. "Look at your future." I walked down the aisle alone. Not abandoned, chosen. And as I stood there, holding the hand of a man the world underestimated, I had no idea the storm was already breaking. In part 3, the vows end, the truth detonates, and my family's world starts collapsing in real time. If you're still watching, comment, "Justice" right now. This is where it turns. The ceremony itself felt suspended outside of time. Like the world had agreed to hold its breath for us. The willow branches swayed softly above our heads, sunlight slipping through the leaves and landing on Marcus's shoulders like a quiet blessing. When the officiant spoke, his voice faded in and out of my awareness. All I could really feel was the steady warmth of Marcus's hands holding mine, anchoring me in place. When he spoke his vows, he didn't read from a card. He didn't perform. He spoke directly to the wound I had carried since childhood. He said my worth was not negotiable. He said I would never be invisible again, and something inside me broke open in a way that felt like healing instead of pain. When he whispered, "Get ready, Mrs. King. Tomorrow the world will know," I smiled, thinking he meant metaphorically. I thought he meant success over time, quiet dignity, the long game. I had no idea he meant the next morning. We kissed. People stood. Applause erupted from both sides of the aisle. And I noticed something strange in the sound of it. The clapping from Marcus's side wasn't polite. It was respectful, measured, like people acknowledging something significant had just happened. I brushed the thought away. Weddings do that to people, I told myself. They make moments feel bigger than they are. The reception was simple and joyful. The food truck parked near the pavilion. My friends laughed, danced barefoot on the grass, hugged me like they were making up for the absence of my family. Marcus's guests stayed mostly reserved, speaking in low voices, watching him with something close to admiration. A silver-haired man approached me and said quietly, "You chose well." He shook Marcus's hand with both of his, like it was an honor. I smiled politely, still not understanding. That night, we went back to our apartment exhausted and happy. We fell asleep, tangled together, no champagne suite, no luxury send-off. Just relief and love. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds. Marcus was already awake, standing at the window with his phone in hand. He looked calm, almost peaceful. "You hungry?" he asked. I nodded. He smiled. "Good. Today's going to be long." Across town, my parents woke up nursing hangovers on a yacht, surrounded by the aftermath of indulgence. Crystal glasses half full, linen napkins stained. The TV hummed in the background. They laughed about my wedding, about how tragic it must have been. They felt safe, untouchable. Then, the news broke. The anchor's voice shifted. Breaking news. A massive government contract. Hydroflow Tech. My father sat up straighter. He knew that name. Everyone did. My mother told him to turn it up. They leaned in. Curious. Interested. Greedy. And then the camera cut to Marcus. Not in boots. Not in coveralls. In a tailored suit. Confident. Controlled. Introduced as the founder and CEO. The room froze. My mother dropped her coffee. My sister screamed. Brad started pacing. Marcus spoke calmly, deliberately, and he told the truth. He talked about water, about dignity of labor, about love, and then he talked about me. He said my name on national television. He said my family abandoned me. He said they called him a disgrace. He said they chose status over their daughter. And just like that, everything my parents built on appearances collapsed in public. Phones started ringing immediately. The governor's wife, the country club, law partners, sponsors, everyone suddenly knew the truth. The family that prided itself on judgment had misjudged the most powerful man in the room. Panic replaced arrogance. Brad realized too late what he had done. Kesha watched her brand crumble in real time as clips spread online. My parents reached for their phones and called me. Over and over. I didn't answer. I turned my phone off and sat at the kitchen table while Marcus made coffee like it was any other morning. "They're going to come," he said quietly. "They always do when the mask breaks." He was right. By the time we returned from a short private honeymoon, Marcus insisted on, my phone was unusable. Messages flooded in from relatives who hadn't bothered to show up. Apologies that sounded like business proposals. My mother called what she did a test. Brad asked for help. Kesha demanded I fix it. That was the moment something crystallized in me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted them to see me without the power imbalance tilted in their favor. So I asked Marcus for one thing. "I want them to see me where I stand now," I said. He nodded. "Then they come to us." He scheduled the meeting at Hydroflow headquarters. He didn't rush it. He let them wait. When I walked into that conference room beside my husband, I didn't feel small. I felt finished with shrinking. They tried apologies. They tried manipulation. Brad tried business. Marcus shut it down with facts, with files, with federal agents. The arrest happened fast, loud, final. My parents' investments were gone, their social memberships revoked, their identity stripped, and then it was my turn. I stood. I told them the truth without raising my voice, that they were only sorry because they lost, that if Marcus were still a plumber in boots, they would still be laughing. I chose myself. I chose my husband. I asked security to escort them out. Watching them leave wasn't satisfying. It was freeing. When the doors closed, Marcus kissed my hand and said, "It's done." And it was. We stood by the window, looking out over the city that once made me feel invisible. I didn't feel victorious. I felt light. If you're still here, don't scroll. Pause for a second. If you've ever been treated like you were less because of who you loved or where you came from, type "I choose me" in the comments. Part 4 is where the final consequences settle and the real lesson lands. After the doors closed behind my parents and sister, the silence in the conference room felt different than any silence I had known before. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was clean. Marcus didn't rush me out. He didn't ask how I felt. He understood something most people don't. Closure doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives with stillness. We stood by the glass wall overlooking Atlanta, the city humming below us. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to earn a place in it. I already had one. We left headquarters through a private elevator. Not because Marcus wanted to flaunt power, but because he wanted to protect me from the media swarm already gathering outside. Cameras were everywhere now, reporters shouting questions, My name being said by strangers who suddenly cared. It was surreal. Less than a week ago, my family couldn't be bothered to sit in a folding chair for me. Now the world wanted a soundbite. We didn't give them one. We went home. Real home, not the penthouse Marcus could afford, the apartment where we had started, because I needed one more moment of normal before everything changed permanently. That night, as we ate takeout on the couch, my phone stayed off. For the first time, ignoring them didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like boundaries. The next few days were chaos for everyone except us. News outlets replayed Marcus's interview. Social media dissected every detail. People found old photos of my parents at galas, screenshots of Kesha's posts mocking my wedding, Brad's smug comments about the help. The internet has no mercy when hypocrisy is served on a silver platter. Sponsors dropped Kesha overnight. Invitations were rescinded. Committees quietly removed my parents' names from boards they once bragged about. And through all of it, messages kept coming. Cousins who had suddenly always believed in me. Aunts who wanted to clear the air. People who had chosen silence when it mattered now wanted access. I didn't respond. Marcus watched it all with calm detachment. "They're learning a hard lesson," he said. "That power without character is temporary." One afternoon, while Marcus was in meetings, I went back to Willow Creek Gardens alone. Mrs. Higgins was there, trimming roses. When she saw me, she smiled like she'd been waiting. "You caused quite the stir," she said gently. I laughed, surprised at how light it felt. We walked the paths together. She told me she had known my mother years ago and regretted giving in to pressure. She apologized. I thanked her, genuinely, not because I needed it, but because forgiveness given freely feels different than forgiveness demanded. Standing there, I realized something important. My parents losing power wasn't the point. Me gaining self-respect was. That night, Marcus and I talked about the future, not in terms of money or expansion or influence, in terms of peace, where we wanted to live, how we wanted to raise children someday, what kind of people we wanted around our table. He told me the truth fully then, about hydroflow, about the contracts, about why he hid it. "I needed to know you loved me when you thought I was ordinary," he said. I took his face in my hands and said, "You were never ordinary. You were just quiet." A week later, my parents tried one last time, not with flowers, not with tears, with desperation. They showed up unannounced at Hydroflow headquarters, demanding to see me. Security turned them away. They went to my old apartment. We weren't there. They left messages with neighbors, with my friends, with anyone who would listen. I heard about it later, secondhand. How small they looked, how confused, how lost without an audience, and for the first time, I felt something I never expected to feel toward them. Pity, not because they lost money or status, but because they had built their entire identity on something that could vanish overnight. I had built mine on something quieter, stronger. Marcus surprised me a few days later with a small gathering at Willow Creek Gardens. No press, no spectacle, just the people who showed up when it mattered. My friends, his team, Mrs. Higgins, the silver-haired man who had hugged Marcus at the wedding. We ate, laughed, told stories. Someone asked me if it hurt that my family wasn't there. I thought about it for a moment and answered honestly, it hurt when I thought I needed them to be whole. It doesn't hurt now. That was the truth. And truth, once you say it out loud, has weight. If you're still watching this and something in your chest feels tight, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not required to bleed for people who only value you when you're useful. You are not obligated to stay small so others can feel tall. And love that humiliates you is not love. Drop a comment and type, "Enough," if you've ever been made to feel like your worth was conditional. In part 5, I'll show you what real rebuilding looks like after the noise dies down, and why the quiet aftermath is where the real justice lives. The weeks after everything exploded were strangely quiet for me and painfully loud for everyone else. That contrast taught me more than any confrontation ever could. When you step out of a toxic system, the system panics because it loses its favorite role for you. Mine was scapegoat, punching bag, the one they blamed so they never had to look inward. Without me available, my parents had nothing left to project onto, and it showed. Marcus and I deliberately slowed our lives down. No interviews, no charity galas, no victory laps. He delegated most of the media handling to his legal and communications teams and made it clear my name was off limits. "She didn't sign up to be consumed," he said, and for the first time in my life, someone protected my peace instead of spending it. I focused on my work. My little landscape studio suddenly had more inquiries than I could handle, not because of the scandal, but because people resonated with what I built. Community gardens, healing spaces, courtyards designed for people who needed somewhere safe to breathe. I poured myself into that work with a clarity I'd never had before. No background noise of parental disappointment. No invisible pressure to prove I was worthy. Just intention. One afternoon, while I was reviewing designs, Linda called me. She hesitated before speaking. "I ran into your mother," she said quietly. I felt my shoulders tense automatically, then relax when I realized something had changed. I wasn't afraid anymore. "How did she look?" I asked. Linda exhaled. "Small. Lost. She tried to ask about you like she still had a right to know." That word landed hard. Right. My parents had always acted like access to me was a given, even when they treated me like a liability. I realized something important then. Cutting contact wasn't punishment. It was accuracy. They no longer had a role in my life that made sense. Marcus and I moved into a new place shortly after. Not because we needed luxury, but because we wanted a fresh start that wasn't haunted by old versions of ourselves. The first night there, we ate on the floor, boxes everywhere, laughing at nothing. I remember thinking, this is what safety feels like. Not perfection, not wealth, safety. A few days later, Marcus asked me something that surprised me. "Do you want to write them a letter?" he asked. "Not to reconcile, just to say what you never got to say." I thought about it long and hard. Then I shook my head. "No," I said, "they wouldn't hear it. And I don't need them to understand anymore." That was another milestone I hadn't expected. The need to be understood by people who refuse to listen eventually dies. And when it does, it leaves behind a quiet strength that doesn't beg. My parents' situation deteriorated fast. Without Brad's money, without their club memberships, without the illusion of proximity to power, their social circle evaporated. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. People who once laughed loudly at their jokes now crossed the street to avoid being associated with them. I heard about it through distant relatives, people who suddenly wanted to confide in me like I was a safe harbor. I listened politely. I didn't engage. Their downfall wasn't entertainment for me. It was confirmation. Confirmation that my instincts had been right all along. One evening, Marcus and I hosted a small dinner. No dress code, no hierarchy, just people who mattered, at the table. Someone asked Marcus if he ever regretted revealing himself publicly the way he did. He smiled and glanced at me before answering. "No," he said, "because the moment mattered, and because some lessons only land when they're seen." I understood exactly what he meant. My parents could have learned quietly. They chose spectacle. The consequences matched the choice. Later that night, after everyone left, Marcus and I sat on the balcony overlooking the city. "Do you feel like you won?" he asked me. I considered the question carefully. "No," I said. "I feel like I stopped losing." That felt more accurate. Winning implies competition. This was survival, healing, growth. A few days later, I received a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a text. A letter from my father. The handwriting was shaky. The tone formal. He apologized without apologizing, explained without taking responsibility, asked without humility. He wanted to meet. He wanted to talk. He wanted help. I read it once, then I folded it and put it away. I didn't tear it up in anger. I didn't respond in righteousness. I simply chose not to reopen a door that had cost me years of my life. That decision didn't feel cruel. It felt clean. Marcus didn't pressure me either way. He just said, whatever you choose, make sure it honors who you are now, not who they needed you to be. That sentence stayed with me because growth means some doors don't close with drama. They close with silence, and that silence is earned. My sister tried a different angle. She reached out publicly, an Instagram post about family, forgiveness, and growth. People weren't buying it. The comments were brutal. But what struck me was how desperate it felt. She had always thrived on attention. Without it, she unraveled. I realized then how trapped she still was, chasing approval from a world that only loved her conditionally. I didn't envy her. I pitied her. As for me, I started sleeping better, laughing more, designing spaces that reflected my own healing. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped bracing for disappointment. I stopped measuring myself against a standard that was never designed for me to meet. That's the thing about families built on status. They don't want you to thrive. They want you to conform. When you don't, they punish you, and when you survive without them, they panic. If you've ever felt guilty for walking away from people who hurt you, hear this clearly. Distance is not betrayal. It's information. It tells you where safety lives. It tells you who respects your humanity. And if someone only values you when you're useful, they don't value you at all. Drop a comment and type, I am done shrinking, if this resonates. In part 6, I'll show you the moment my parents finally understood they had lost me for good, and why that realization mattered more than any public humiliation ever could. The moment my parents finally understood they had lost me did not happen on television or in a courtroom or across a polished conference table. It happened quietly, the way real endings usually do. There were no raised voices, no dramatic speeches, no last-minute confessions. Just a door they expected to open that stayed firmly shut. About a month after the meeting at Hydroflow, my father tried one last maneuver. He didn't call my phone. He didn't write another letter. He went to the one place he thought still belonged to him: control. He contacted my landlord from the old apartment, the one Marcus and I had already moved out of, and tried to access information about me under the guise of concern. He introduced himself by name, by title, by reputation, expecting compliance. The landlord refused. Policies had changed. Ownership had changed. Marcus had quietly purchased the building weeks earlier to protect tenants from exactly that kind of pressure. When my father realized he could not even track me through property records anymore, something in him cracked. He was a man who had always known where everyone stood in relation to him. Suddenly, he couldn't find me on the map at all. That loss of access unsettled him more than losing money ever could. A few days later, my mother tried a different approach. She showed up at Willow Creek Gardens during one of my site visits, hoping to accidentally run into me. Mrs. Higgins called to warn me. I told her it was fine. I would handle it. When I arrived, my mother was standing near the gazebo, hands clasped, posture stiff, dressed like she was attending a board luncheon instead of trespassing in my life. She looked older, smaller. When she saw me, her face softened into that familiar expression she used when she wanted something. Nia, she said, like my name was still hers to use freely. I didn't hug her. I didn't smile. I stood at a respectful distance and waited. Silence makes people honest faster than anger ever does. She filled it quickly. She talked about stress, about embarrassment, about how hard everything had been for her. Not once did she ask how I was. Not once did she acknowledge what she had done. Finally, she said the line I had expected. "We didn't know," she whispered. "If we had known who Marcus really was, we would have handled things differently." That was it. The confirmation. I looked at her and felt no heat, no rage, no urge to correct her. Just clarity. "That's the problem," I said calmly. "You should have handled things differently because he was a good man, not because he was wealthy." Her eyes filled with tears. "We're your parents," she said. "We deserve another chance." I shook my head slowly. "You deserve the consequences of your choices. I deserve peace." She reached for me then, instinctively, like a mother reaching for a child who scraped a knee. I stepped back, not out of spite, out of truth. "I'm not your project anymore," I said. "I'm not your extension, and I'm not the daughter who will sacrifice herself to make you comfortable." She stood there frozen, like she didn't recognize the woman in front of her. That's when it landed. She hadn't lost me because of Marcus. She lost me because she never learned how to love without conditions. I walked away without another word. That was the last time I saw her in person. My father reacted differently. When he realized manipulation wouldn't work, he retreated into silence. No more letters. No more calls. That silence spoke volumes. It wasn't respect. It was wounded pride. He didn't know how to exist in a relationship where he didn't have leverage. Losing me wasn't painful because he missed me. It was painful because he couldn't control the narrative anymore. My sister unraveled in public. Without Brad, without money, without protection, she tried to rebrand herself as misunderstood. Victim. Survivor. The internet was not kind. People don't forgive cruelty when it's exposed without remorse. She reached out to me privately once, late at night. "I don't know who I am without them," she wrote. For a moment, I felt the old pull, the urge to rescue, to fix. Then I remembered something Marcus told me early on. "You're allowed to have compassion without self-sacrifice." I replied with one sentence. "I hope you figure it out." That was all. I didn't offer solutions. I didn't offer shelter. I didn't reopen wounds. Because growth doesn't require you to bleed again for people who watched you bleed the first time and did nothing. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Not flashy, not dramatic, steady. I built my firm slowly and intentionally. I hired people who valued collaboration over competition. I designed spaces that reflected what I had learned. Open lines, natural light, places that didn't force you to perform to belong. Marcus expanded HydroFlow with the same philosophy. Ethical contracts, transparent leadership, people who respected labor at every level. Watching him lead taught me something powerful. Real authority doesn't need to humiliate to feel strong. It elevates quietly. One evening, months later, we attended a small industry event together. Nothing extravagant, just professionals exchanging ideas. I noticed something interesting. People didn't approach me as Marcus's wife. They approached me as Nia, as a peer, as someone whose work mattered. That recognition felt different than approval. It wasn't conditional. It wasn't borrowed. It was earned. On the drive home, Marcus asked me how it felt. "Strange," I admitted. "Good strange," he smiled. "That's what alignment feels like," he said. I thought about my parents then, about how hard they worked to appear aligned with power while being completely misaligned with love. I realized they would never understand what they lost. Not fully. And that was okay. Closure doesn't always require understanding. Sometimes it only requires acceptance. If you're watching this and waiting for the people who hurt you to finally get it, hear me clearly. They might never. And that doesn't mean you failed. It means you outgrew the space they kept you in. Growth isn't loud. It doesn't always look like justice served on a screen. Sometimes it looks like walking away without looking back, and building a life so grounded that their opinions can't reach you anymore. Drop a comment and type, "I choose peace," if this part hit you. In part 7, I'll show you what happens when the world stops watching, when the applause fades, and how true freedom shows up in the smallest, quietest moments. When the world stopped watching, that's when I learned what freedom actually feels like. Not the loud kind that comes with headlines or public vindication, but the quiet kind that settles into your bones and stays. The calls slowed. The articles stopped recycling the story. People found a new scandal to obsess over, and in that silence, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel empty. I felt present. Marcus and I fell into a rhythm that didn't revolve around proving anything to anyone. Mornings became slow. Coffee on the balcony, sunlight creeping across the floor. Conversations that weren't about damage control or strategy, just life. I realized how much energy I had spent bracing for disappointment before. Waiting for the next comment, the next judgment, the next moment someone would remind me I wasn't enough. Without that noise, I could finally hear myself think. I could finally ask what I wanted without filtering it through fear. I didn't want revenge dinners or apology tours. I wanted stability. I wanted work that mattered. I wanted friendships that didn't require performance. Marcus understood that instinctively. He never pushed me toward visibility. He never asked me to capitalize on the story. He treated my boundaries like they were sacred. That alone felt like a miracle. One afternoon, while I was sketching designs for a community garden, a young woman approached me. She recognized me, not from the news, but from the project itself. She told me she'd grown up feeling invisible in her family too. She said seeing the garden come together made her feel like there was space for people like her. That moment mattered more than any headline ever could. It reminded me why I started designing spaces in the first place. Not to impress, to heal. At home, Marcus began cooking more. Something about working with his hands in a different way grounded him. We'd talk about nothing and everything. About how strange it is that people equate loud confidence with strength. About how many people mistake cruelty for standards. About how power doesn't reveal character, it amplifies it. Sometimes we'd sit in silence and it wouldn't feel awkward. It would feel earned. That's when I knew I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. My parents' absence stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a fact. Neutral, uncharged. I no longer imagined conversations with them in my head. I no longer rehearsed explanations. I no longer wondered what I could have done differently. That's when you know something has healed. When you stop negotiating with ghosts. A few months later, Marcus asked me a question that caught me off guard. Do you ever miss them? I thought about it honestly. Not defensively, not emotionally. I miss the idea of parents, I said. I don't miss the people they were to me. He nodded. That makes sense. There was no judgment in his voice. Just understanding. That's the thing about being with the right person. You don't have to justify your scars. They don't ask you to minimize them to stay comfortable. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still stressful days, long hours, hard decisions, but none of it felt personal in the way it used to. Failure didn't feel like confirmation of worthlessness anymore. Criticism didn't feel like exile. I had internal safety now. And once you have that, the world loses its grip on you. We hosted small gatherings, people who showed up with food and honesty instead of expectations. Laughter that didn't need to be curated. Stories told without fear of being mocked later. I noticed something interesting at those dinners. People relaxed around us. They didn't posture. They didn't compete. It was like the absence of judgment created permission for everyone else to drop their armor too. That's what healthy environments do. They don't demand excellence to grant belonging. They let people be human first. One evening, after everyone left, Marcus looked around the living room and smiled. "This," he said, gesturing vaguely, "this is what I wanted all along." I knew what he meant. Not the wealth, not the recognition, this sense of groundedness, of alignment, of being able to look at your life and not feel like you're betraying yourself to keep it. I thought about my sister sometimes, about how she was still chasing validation from an audience that had already turned on her. I didn't feel superior. I felt relieved that I was no longer in that race. Chasing approval is exhausting, and it never ends. Choosing peace does. There was a moment, small but significant, when I realized just how far I'd come. I ran into someone from my parents' old social circle at a coffee shop. She recognized me, hesitated, then approached cautiously. "You're doing well," she said. It wasn't admiration. It was surprise, like she hadn't expected me to survive. I smiled politely and said, "I am," and that was it. No explanation, no justification, no need to shrink or perform. Walking out of that cafe, I felt light. Not because I'd impressed her, but because I didn't care if I had. That's freedom. If you're watching this and wondering when it stops hurting, when the anger fades, when the need to prove yourself finally loosens its grip, let me tell you something honestly. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments, quiet ones. The first time you say no without guilt. The first time you enjoy something without waiting for it to be taken away. The first time someone treats you with respect and you don't flinch. Healing isn't dramatic, it's consistent, and it's worth it. Drop a comment and type "free" if you're starting to feel this shift or if you're craving it. In part 8, I'll talk about the unexpected ripple effects, how choosing yourself changes not just your life, but the lives of people watching you quietly take notes. I didn't realize how far the ripples traveled until people started quietly telling me what my choice had changed for them. Not publicly, not in dramatic speeches, in small, almost hesitant confessions. The kind people only share when they feel safe. It started with my team. One of my junior designers stayed late one evening while I was reviewing plans. She hovered near my desk, like she wanted to say something, but wasn't sure she was allowed to take up space. Finally, she said, "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. She told me she had turned down a job her parents wanted her to take because it looked impressive, but felt wrong. She said watching me walk away from my family's approval made her realize she didn't have to live someone else's life just to be loved. That stopped me cold. I hadn't intended to be an example. I had just been trying to survive. But survival, when done openly, gives other people permission to breathe. That realization changed how I led. I became more intentional about the culture I built. No quiet shaming, no hierarchy games, no reward for sacrificing yourself to look committed. People worked hard, but they weren't afraid. Productivity improved. Creativity flourished. Not because I demanded excellence, but because I removed fear. Marcus noticed the same thing at Hydroflow. Departments that had once been tense loosened when leadership stopped performing and started listening. Turnover dropped. Loyalty grew. People protect what protects them. That's a lesson my parents never learned. The ripple effects reached further than work. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out. Not to gossip, but to tell me they were rethinking their own boundaries. One friend admitted she'd stayed in a relationship where she was constantly belittled because she thought love required endurance. Watching you walk away from people who treated you like that made me realize I wasn't weak for wanting more, she said. Another told me she finally confronted her parents about how they'd compared her to her siblings her whole life. She didn't get an apology, but she got peace, and that was enough. I realized then that my story wasn't about humiliation or triumph. It was about modeling self-respect without cruelty. I hadn't destroyed my parents. They destroyed themselves by choosing image over integrity. All I did was step aside and refuse to participate anymore. That distinction matters, because when you walk away cleanly, without begging or lashing out, it forces everyone watching to confront their own choices. Some people hate you for it. Others learn from it. Both reactions tell you who belongs in your future. There was one ripple that surprised me the most. My aunt, the one who had always stayed quiet during my childhood, showed up at one of my community garden openings. She stood at the edge at first, like she didn't know if she was welcome. When I noticed her and walked over, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "I wish I had been brave like you." She told me she'd married young, stayed small, followed the rules, and still ended up invisible. "Watching you choose yourself," she said, "made me realize it's never too late to stop disappearing." A month later, she left her husband. Not dramatically, quietly. She moved into a small apartment, started volunteering, started living. That's when it hit me. Choosing yourself doesn't just change your life, it disrupts narratives people have been using to justify their own suffering. And not everyone will thank you for that disruption. Some will resent you deeply. My parents' former friends were split. Some distanced themselves out of embarrassment. Others tried to cozy up, hoping proximity to Marcus could restore their relevance. Marcus shut that down quickly. "Access isn't transferable," he told his team, "and respect isn't for sale." That line became something of a mantra in our house. Respect isn't for sale. You can't buy it with donations or titles or associations. You earn it by how you treat people when no one's watching. That's why the quiet moments mattered more to me than the public ones. Like the afternoon Marcus and I spent planting herbs on our balcony, dirt under our nails, laughing about how absurd life can be. Or the morning I realized I hadn't thought about my parents in weeks. Not with anger, not with longing, just absence. Neutral space where pain used to live. That's the ripple no one talks about, the internal one. The way your nervous system slowly learns it's safe. That it doesn't have to stay on high alert. That love doesn't come with conditions attached. And once that happens, you show up differently everywhere. You stop tolerating subtle disrespect. You stop explaining yourself to people who already decided not to listen. You stop shrinking to keep the peace. And when you do that, people around you either rise to meet you or fall away. Both outcomes are gifts. If you're watching this and wondering whether choosing yourself will make you selfish, let me say this clearly. Selfishness is exploiting others for your comfort. Self-respect is refusing to be exploited. They are not the same, and anyone who tells you they are is benefiting from your silence. Drop a comment and type, "I give myself permission" if you're starting to see this in your own life. In part 9, I'll talk about the final shift, the moment I stopped defining my life by what I escaped and started defining it by what I was building. The final shift didn't announce itself with a dramatic realization or a sudden emotional breakthrough. It arrived quietly, disguised as a normal day. I was sitting at my desk early one morning, reviewing a proposal for a public healing garden attached to a senior center, when I noticed something strange. I wasn't thinking about my parents at all. Not in comparison, not in defiance, not in relief. They simply weren't part of the mental landscape anymore, and that's when it hit me. I had stopped defining my life by what I escaped and started defining it by what I was building. That distinction changed everything. For a long time, even after the public fallout, my sense of self had still been reactive. I wasn't shrinking anymore, but I was still orienting myself around absence, around what I didn't have, around the family I lost, around the version of myself I had outgrown. That's a necessary phase. You can't heal without acknowledging the wound, but eventually, if you keep your eyes on the scar too long, it becomes another way of letting the past control you. I realized I didn't want to be known as the woman who walked away from her family. I wanted to be known as the woman who built something meaningful with her life. And that required a different kind of attention, a forward-facing one. Marcus noticed the shift before I did. One evening, as we were cooking together, he said, "You're lighter, not happier, not louder, lighter." I asked him what he meant. He smiled and said, "You're not carrying ghosts around anymore." He was right. I had stopped dragging old conversations into new rooms. I had stopped bracing for judgment that wasn't coming. I had stopped living like my worth was a rebuttal. Instead, my days were filled with creation, with choices that felt aligned rather than defensive. I said yes to projects that mattered and no to ones that didn't. Without over-explaining, I hired people based on integrity instead of polish. I designed spaces with intention instead of spectacle. And the more I did that, the less my old life fit me. Not in a painful way, in the way childhood clothes stop fitting once you grow. You don't mourn them, you thank them for what they did, and move on. There was one moment that solidified this shift completely. I was invited to speak at a small professional conference about sustainable design. Nothing flashy, no press, just people who cared about the work. After my talk, a woman approached me. She didn't mention my family. She didn't mention Marcus. She didn't mention the story at all. She said, "Your work feels calm. It feels like it knows where it's going." That compliment landed deeper than any validation I had ever chased. Because it wasn't about what I survived, it was about what I created. I realized then that my parents' greatest loss wasn't access to Marcus's power or my forgiveness. It was the chance to know the woman I became when I stopped trying to earn love. And that loss wasn't mine to carry. Marcus and I talked about children sometimes, about what kind of environment we wanted to raise them in, not just physically, but emotionally. We agreed on one non-negotiable: our home would never be a place where love was transactional, where affection was tied to achievement, where silence was used as punishment. That decision felt like rewriting a lineage, not with anger, but with intention. And intention is far more powerful than resentment. I also noticed how differently I responded to conflict now. When challenges came up, I didn't default to self-blame. When someone disappointed me, I didn't assume it was my fault. When I made mistakes, I corrected them without spiraling into shame. That internal shift was the real inheritance I built for myself, something no one could revoke, something no status symbol could replace. The world still tested me. Opportunities came with strings attached. People tried to leverage proximity to Marcus. Old acquaintances resurfaced when it benefited them, but my response was different now. I didn't react. I evaluated. I didn't explain. I decided. That kind of clarity scares people who rely on confusion to maintain control, but it attracts people who value honesty. My circle became smaller and stronger. My work became more focused. My life became quieter in the best possible way. There was no longer a need to prove that walking away was the right choice. The life I was living was proof enough. One afternoon, while walking through a completed garden project, I watched an elderly man sit on a bench I had designed, close his eyes, and smile as the breeze moved through the trees. He looked peaceful, and for a moment, I felt something close to awe. This is what I build now, I thought. Not defenses, not arguments, spaces where people can rest. That realization felt like coming home to myself. If you're watching this and you're still in the phase where everything feels like a reaction, hear me clearly. That stage passes. You won't always be defined by what you escaped. One day, without fanfare, you'll wake up and realize your life is oriented toward what you're creating instead. And that's when real freedom begins. Not when they apologize, not when they understand, but when their absence stops being the loudest thing in the room. Drop a comment and type, "I am building," if you're ready to stop living in response mode and start living on your own terms. In part 10, the final part, I'll leave you with the lesson that took me the longest to learn and the one that changed how I see love, family, and self-worth forever.